Editing elements. The second button of the model field in the Properties toolbox for an MEP object allows you to make changes to the element. By selecting it, you access the Project BIM Object Library Editor. The editor window presents the 3D preview of the MEP entity in the central part on which you are working. The model can be orbited and it's possible to view the connectors it has, in the positions assigned to them and each identified by its own label. On the right there is the Properties toolbox. The toolbox is structured in different sections and has various fields, each intended to report different information relating to the object. In particular, the first fields specify entity descriptive data, such as title, brand, and model. Next are the Properties sections, consisting of a field from where you can edit object properties, characteristics, geometry, and technical data, which include specific and particularized fields for the entity. In the Characteristics section there is the Model field. Clicking on this field enables a button which, if selected, in turn arranges the choice between three options. The first available item is Edit Data. Selecting it enables the wizard window for editing item data. As specified by a text message displayed on the screen, modifications are being made to the MEP object from a non-parametric 3D model, therefore the variations of the geometric properties will not modify the object. It's possible to modify these values by setting the relating fields. On the other hand, by choosing the next item, Modify Model, the wizard window structured in two steps is enabled, intended respectively for the selection of the type of object among those proposed, based on the particular entity activated from the drawing menu, and for setting the data characteristic of the object. The third and last item available when selecting the appropriate button in the Model field is Replace Geometry from File. By making this choice, the wizard window is enabled with access to the procedure for replacing the 3D model of the MEP object by importing a new 3D model from a file in any format, without modifying the characteristic data of the object. First of all, select the Browse option to search for the file to import. Once the choice has been made, the 3D model import window opens with a preview of the model being imported from different observation points. Furthermore, on the right there are the Options sections, to assign a name to the object and from which to change the values of the dimensions acquired automatically from the imported model, and Positioning, with functionality, to move the axis on the model and thus define the positioning point. The second step of this procedure allows you to act on the model connectors, inserting or modifying them. In the initial editor window, therefore, the preview of the 3D model will be updated, as well as the properties shown in the toolbox on the right. At the end of the editing phase, the changes previously saved are extended to the object on the drawing. The Project BIM Object Library Editor. In the upper toolbar of the editor window, accessed via the second button of the Model field for an MEP entity, the Open in Library option is available, which opens the profile of the MEP object from its location in the project library. The same profile can be selected directly from its library, by accessing the project library from the BIM Objects library node of the navigator, then to the Mechanical or Electrical Systems archive to select the specific folder of the category to which the chosen object belongs. In the central part of the window there is the 3D model of the object. On the right appears the toolbox Mechanical Plants. At the bottom there are icons representing all the entities belonging to the same category, therefore to the same folder of the library from which the profile was selected. On the left is the organization of the folders in the library. Furthermore, the top toolbar in this case offers additional features. In particular, it has commands for exporting and sharing, as well as tools for making changes to the model. The last section of the toolbar is in fact tools and includes the solid modeling button from which to choose one of the proposed possibilities for modeling the object. To follow the commands Edit Connectors and Edit Model. Selecting the Edit Connectors option opens the wizard window to insert and/or modify the connectors. On the right side of the window there are some modifiable information relating to the MEP entity being analyzed. The window also includes a preview of the 3D model of the MEP object, which can be orbited in space using the right mouse button and which can be zoomed for better visibility of the details. Any connectors that the entity already has are visible in blue, positioned in the appropriate points on the object and identified by a label. If you select a connector on the object, the side section of the information is specific to it and consists of various fields for specifying as much information. The position field reports the coordinates in space identifying the position of the connector on the 3D object. It's possible to act on the values of the coordinates, making numerical changes which then translate into a repositioning of the connector on the object. The description field allows you to edit a description for the connector which will then be placed next to the identifier in the connector label. The connection field has a drop-down menu from which to choose the type of connection to be assigned to the connector, then female, male, flange or smooth. By default, each new connector to be added is assigned the female type. By varying the type of connection, in fact, the shape of the connector also changes. By choosing a flange type attachment, for example, the connector will appear as a solid disc with a central hole. The shape field offers the choice between the punctual or surface options. Leaving it as a point shape connection, the following profile type field allows you to assign a circular or rectangular shape to the connector. As you can see, this changes the appearance of the connector on the object. For each of the two types available, you can manage the value of some parameters, thickness, external base and external height for a rectangular profile, thickness and external diameter in the case of circular profile. To add a connector to the MEP entity, click on the Add Connector button. Snap node aids make it easier to place the connector on the object. With a fast click, the connector with the shape and profile set is displayed in transparency. With a second click, it's positioned at the chosen point. In the case of a surface connector, the area identified as the connection zone is colored in yellow. The point connector, on the other hand, will be colored to blue and has a shape that matches the chosen profile in settings. The connector object, similar to an MEP entity, is supported by graphical features for its orientation in space. By default, the positioning point is in its center of gravity. This point can be rotated using the F7 and F8 keys from the keyboard or using the functions of the object grip. Selecting the Edit Template option opens the two-step wizard window for editing the MEP entity template. At the first step you select the type of object from those available. Once the choice of the type has been made, proceed to the next step for setting the characteristic data of the object. If you want to change the choice of the type, it's still possible to go back to the previous step and modify the selection previously made. In the phase of setting the characteristic data, a box is displayed with the 3D model of the chosen entity, to which the relative foreseen connectors are associated. On the right there is the toolbox of the specific properties for the selected type and whose values can be modified within the limits set for each parameter. If you enter a value for a certain property that does not fall within the range of that parameter, a message appears on the screen that communicates the error and specifies the range of values to be respected. At the end of the changes, the entity arranged on the model will present the changes made. Selecting elements from the BIM object library. The third button available in the Model field, under the Properties Toolbox section for an MEP entity, allows you to access the BIM Objects library, from which you can select a different element within the category to which it belongs. Similarly, in the case of connection entities, you can select the same button in the Pipe field to access the libraries, to choose a different material for the pipe or duct and a different profile shape. You can choose the BIM object library from which to select the object. By choosing to remain in the project library, in the case of a parametric MEP object, all the elements belong to the specific category from which it was chosen are proposed. The profiles in the project library are updated only when the entity is selected from the drawing menu, even if it's not then inserted on the model or in the case in which, after being added, it's deleted. Therefore, the project library dynamically follows the choices made during the modeling phase of the MEP entities, progressively updating itself with the selections made and the settings foreseen for the relative parameters. From the drop-down menu you can choose to select the item from its category in the General Library or from the User Library. By selecting the Edit option, you directly access the Element Editor window. From the Online buttons you can access the online BIM Objects library where the free mechanical plants galleries are available. When a specific profile in the online library is opened, its model is displayed, its properties are consulted and the relative file can be downloaded in Edificius format. The downloaded object is automatically added to the project library, like the other MEP entities modeled for the project being processed. It's also immediately available to be placed on the drawing and can be connected to other objects. In fact, it will be a configurable entity exactly like those that are selected and added from the drawing menu. When it's selected, the Related Properties toolbox is enabled to access the various fields and, if necessary, make the changes allowed on the element. The BIM Online Object Library window is organized in such a way as to propose a preview of each MEP object it contains, with the identifier of the author who published it. The online library, in fact, is shared by all users who use the software, who will be able to publish the profile of a customized MEP object in the library or, similarly, download profiles created and published by others. The home of the online library is organized in such a way as to propose the choice between the piping and equipment categories, thus simplifying the profile selection by filtering by entity category. Furthermore, you can consult the profile created by the author of an MEP entity in the online library, in order to know all the objects shared in the library by that same author. Then it's also possible to organize object profiles in the online library according to different criteria, such as most viewed or downloaded, the most recently added, etc. Connecting MEP objects. Using the connectors that an MEP object has, it's possible to make transitions in order to connect it to other entities, as well as insert it into the network of one or more systems. Each MEP entity has connection points or surfaces by default. Additional or different connectors can be set up using the MEP Object Connector Editor. By way of example, let's suppose to add two different entities to the model. From the Mechanical Systems group, an equipment object is selected, while a junction box is selected from the Electrical Systems group. Concerning the connection methods, the two objects differ in that the first has, by default, point connectors, while the box is designed for surface connections. Connections can be managed both on levels and by working in the 3D view. However, the display on the layer will be limited to only the connectors, if any, visible from that observation point. On the contrary, in the three-dimensional it's possible to orbit around the object and thus recognize any labels in each point. Let's consider the implementation of connections of an MEP object in the 3D view. To make the connections, proceed by selecting the pipe profile, duct, or any connection entity you want to insert from the drawing menu. The system assigned to the pipe will be automatically transmitted to the MEP object to which it will be connected. With this profile selected, moving on the model near the MEP object to be connected, green circles are highlighted at the connection points, or similarly, green surfaces in the case of surface connectors. These are snaps that appear on the connectors and specify any free attachments or connectors available to make the connection, although they do not identify the compatibility of the connection to be made. By placing the cursor in correspondence with a free connection, be it point or surface, the snap, previously colored green, becomes yellow, thus enabling the possibility of making the connection with a click of the mouse. In the case of a point-type connector, by clicking on the yellow circular snap, the software proposes the choice between the most suitable size for the selected attachment or a size selected from the library. In the first case, if the chosen entity for the connection isn't suitable for the connection, an error message appears warning of the incompatibility issue for the specific profile. Otherwise, the type is automatically identified by the software and the ruler is enabled to define the length of the connection section currently being traced. By choosing to proceed with the dimension selected from the library, the connection entity chosen from the drawing menu will be arranged and subsequently configured. In this case, if the dimension assigned to the connection profile is not the same as the connector, any necessary transitions or fittings are automatically inserted. The direction and verse of the pipeline, in this case, are determined by the orientation of the connector from which the connection is being made, therefore the tools to support the pipeline tracing are not available. Once a first connection section has been made, it's possible to use the directional cube and protractor to proceed in a different direction, obtaining the insertion of the necessary automatic fittings. By clicking on the yellow area of a surface connector, the directional cube and the protractor are enabled. These two tools are completely similar as to other functions and uses seen so far for the tracing connections in 3D. The cube allows the user to trace the pipe along one of the planes parallel to its faces and to pass through the starting point chosen for connection. The protractor allows you to define direction and verse in the identified plane. With a click of the mouse, the pipe is fixed along the chosen direction and the ruler appears to define pipe length in a subsequent step. Alternatively, you can trace to another available connection point to link multiple objects together. Also in this context, blue snaps are available to take advantage of reference points or lines on the model.